All right, pandemic management, election timing, the rise of the People's Party, final stage campaign strategies, lots of moving parts and lots to cover with our panel of commentators as the final days of the campaign are here. Let's bring them in. Susan Smith's a Liberal commentator, Kate Harrison's a Conservative commentator, and Kim Wright is an NDP commentator. It's good to see you all again. Susan, what did you think today as you watched Aaron O'Toole refuse to say whether he still thinks Jason Kenney's done a better job than Justin Trudeau in managing the pandemic?
Yeah, I bet he was wishing that Jason Kenney had waited a couple of days to make that announcement or done it a while ago. He would not distance himself from his former cabinet colleague in the and caucus colleague in the Harper government. And he would not say that Jason Kenney hadn't done a good job. And I guess if you want to be prime minister, you have to work with everybody. There's no question of that. But Justin Trudeau was quick to say, well, things needed to be done more easily. And finally, the vaccine passport, sorry, Peter, I'm all over the place, but the vaccine passport stuff that Kenney has come out with and Scott Moe has come out with isn't helpful to Aaron O'Toole at all. So he's dancing quickly and he's trying to say, look over here at something else.
All right, Kate Harrison, why won't Aaron O'Toole answer that question of who's better managed the pandemic, Jason Kenney or Justin Trudeau, and let Canadians know, which approach he might be closer to if he forms government?
Yeah, I think he's trying to be mindful of the precedent here. At some point, all of the provinces are going to go through various iterations of this pandemic. Today's Alberta may be tomorrow's Nova Scotia. I think everybody hopes that that's not the case, right? But I don't think that it's helpful for a prime minister or those seeking to be prime minister to start critiquing in detail the actions of the provinces. What is more helpful is trying to work together with the provinces and come up with a collaborative solution on how to address the pandemic. I wonder if perhaps we weren't in this election period when things are incredibly tense, and if we had a stable government in Ottawa that was focused on collaborating with premiers on this, if we would maybe be in a different situation.
But it's only a story today because of Aaron O'Toole's past comments saying Jason Kenney was doing a better job than Justin Trudeau. So, I mean, it's there because the Conservative leader did at one point pick sides.
Yeah, I mean, look, hindsight being what it is, it's difficult to really give a sound. Obviously, the Premier came out and apologized for it. I think the balance that Aaron O'Toole needs to walk here is in, again, not being seen to meddle too deliberately in provincial affairs, because he is no more responsible for the situation in Alberta than you or I. But of course, trying to respect how different premiers and provinces have handled this. There are provinces that have had, worse COVID death numbers, for example. We do not see any of our political leaders attacking those provinces for their handling of the pandemic.
All right. Kim Wright, Jagmeet Singh today was critical of Jason Kenney and Justin Trudeau on pandemic management, but he wouldn't say whether he would use federal emergency powers to force a different pandemic response on Alberta. But we just heard an Alberta MP, the only incumbent New Democrat there, Heather McPherson, tell us that she thinks it is time to invoke those emergency powers. Is it? Is it time for a federal government to swoop in and take a different approach in Alberta?
Well, I think it's important to understand what the language is. I wouldn't use the phrase swoop in. I think when you're talking about things like pandemic and things that are national in scope, everyone likes to say, oh, it's this person's jurisdiction or that jurisdiction. And frankly, don't get me started on the fact that municipalities aren't a recognized order of government within the Constitution and what that all means for who's responsible for what. But ultimately, what Jagmeet Singh and the New Democrats were also pointing out was that earlier this summer, Justin Trudeau and Jason Kenney stood on a stage and go, yeah, let's go to Stampede. Let's open up as fast and as well as we can. At the end of the day, what all of this boils down to is, do you have, the ability to have conversations with people across the political spectrum? Do you have conversations with ministers and first ministers? How do you make sure that there is buy-in? And what Canadians are cynical about is this finger pointing, this nonstop finger pointing, whether it's been on daycare or pharmacare or dental care or anything else. And yes, Susan's going to start quoting chapters and sections of the Constitution and the Charter and all of that. And that's all well and swell, except for the fact that when people are dying and when there are not the emergency situations that we have all suffered through, everyone is going to go back to their corners and do their finger pointing and their rhetoric, and Canadians are tired of it, and it's time to move forward.
Well, but all of that so takes us to, like, do we now have, I think we've talked about this before, but we've got 3 or 4 days left now before the election day. Susan, have we got a ballot question now? Do you think this is now being framed for Canadians?
Yeah, the health of the country. It's always been that. The health and the future direction of the country. You want healthy communities where people are safe and you're fighting the pandemic? Do you want a healthy economy where there's childcare and plans to get people back to work? And do you want a healthy climate with a plan that has been costed and is practical and has been applauded by the environmental movement? That to me is the choice, and who can best deliver that to you.
Okay.
And I do think that's what people are going to be considering.
Kate, I want to hear you on that as well, but one of the regular attacks that Erin O'Toole is facing is he's beholden to the anti-vaxxers. He denies that, but the People's Party leader, People's Party of Canada leader, Maxime Bernier, he embraces that criticism because he is the anti-vaxxer leader, and he's going up in the polls. So how much of an effect could the People's Party of Canada have on the Conservatives in tight races, and does that affect the narrative that Erin O'Toole is trying to put before Canadians in terms of choices?
There is a pretty steep hill to climb for the PPC in terms of the efficiency of their vote, trying to pull people out to the polls that have traditionally never voted in elections before. You're dealing more with a vote of protest rather than one of partisanship. So all of these kind of things together make for a pretty unreliable voter base. So I think Erin O'Toole is smart to not chase that. It's important that all parties recognize the sentiment that is underpinning the PPC's support right now, and I don't think ignore it. Certainly don't pour gasoline on that fire. But for Erin O'Toole, the focus really does need to be on that middle voter that is more concerned about affordability than they are about tyranny in Ottawa.
Kim Wright, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on what we're seeing with the PPC, because they're, as they move, there's a lot of implications and possibilities here for some tight seat races where all the parties could be involved. If, in some of those tight races where they could siphon some support away from Conservative candidates. And to be clear, a lot of the analysis is still being done, but it suggests that PPC support is not just from Conservatives, it's new voters, it's people on the Libertarian side. So what do you think of all of this?
Yeah, the entrails of what will be the PPC's second election will be quite interesting, and whether or not they can actually get vote out, as Kate pointed out. There are some ridings that they are certainly showing momentum. They have more signs in certain ridings, and I'm looking at places like Chatham, Kent, Leamington, or Essex. Are they going to pull enough Conservative voters, or are these net new voters? Those are questions that I'm looking at. There's also some interesting conversations about where are some of the Green Party voters going. Yes, some of them are going to the New Democrats, some to the Liberals, but there's also, because Elizabeth May had also cultivated a bit of a social conservative bent, and certainly some of her candidates last time were very heavily pro-life candidates. So where are they going now? So how those will all shake out are certainly storylines we're looking to on Monday. But yes, the PPC will play a role in some ridings. I don't think they will have as big of an impact in those ridings where the Conservatives get 30, 40,000 votes.
I mean, they've got a presence at Weston and Alberta in particular, and Saskatchewan, but in BC. But some of those Conservative seats are won by 30 and 35,000 votes. So,
yeah.
Okay,
it's the urban ridings to watch, right? Where you're within a margin of a few points. I'm thinking around your Calgarys and your Edmontons.
Right.
If the PPC are going to play
and in some of those, we're now hearing in some of those seats, perhaps around Toronto, where they might have a bit of a presence, and I think Kim touched on it a bit in Ontario. But, yeah. Let me.
Peter, I think just quickly, I think Erin O'Toole is chasing some of those votes, and that's why he won't condemn Jason Kenney, and that's why the gun stuff has been flip-flopping all over the place, and that's why the vaccination position is the one that he's taking.
Okay.
Kate mentioned that he wasn't chasing them. He's trying to hang on to that. He doesn't want the far fringe of the people that used to vote Conservative but he wants the ones that are teetering on the edge of voting for Max Bernier, and that's a dangerous game to play.
Okay, let me finish on this, because this is an election like we haven't seen. Certainly, I haven't seen. In terms of these final few days, it's all about getting out the vote and making sure your supporters get to the polls. We've seen a lot, 5.8 million people in the advanced polling. There'll be 1 million plus mail-in ballots. But I want to get, because you're all kind of nuts and bolts people, so I want to get what happens in these final days in terms of trying to ensure you can get people to the polls to support your candidates, because you can't put them all in a big bus and drive them there, and it's all got to be carefully done. So, Kate, let me start with you. What's the challenge here?
Yeah, a really big challenge this go around, Peter, is that there's far fewer polling locations than there have been in the past. So if you're in a rural riding, for example, you may be required to travel considerably farther than you have in the past to go out to the polls. So for folks on the ground that are organizing right now, we're talking about, it used to be a carpool or a bus, as you say. Obviously, that can't happen with COVID now. So there's really specific, they need more bodies to try and take people to the polls, because they don't have them as readily accessible. So that's a big challenge for polling vote on Monday.
Okay, Kim, how do you get around those challenges?
Yeah, partially is also understanding where some of the polling stations disappeared during the course of this election. I can tell you, in the building that I live in downtown Toronto, that has always had a polling station in the building, was told last Friday evening that we were no longer going to have that polling station, that you had to go out and a few blocks away. Right. So those will be things that, as the parties are identifying their supporters, identifying their voters, which has been a challenge this election, they are going to have real issues getting there. People will have to pack their patience, but also Elections Canada are going to have some explaining to do why they don't do recruiting year-round and get ready for elections. Okay,
Susan, I got 20 seconds left. Sorry about that, but you got 20 seconds to give me your thoughts on that.
Okay. Election day is about get out the vote, Peter. Often there's a big push around dinner time and after work. This year, people will have more flexibility. There are more people working from home. So I expect the polling booths to be busy all day. And I expect voters and teams knocking on doors and making those calls to get people out to be busy all day. So I think it'll be a steady stream.
Okay.
And that'll be the differentiator.
All right. And we'll see all of you on election night here in our CPAC coverage. Thank you all for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.
Peter.